What is going on, everybody? SchwayZ here, and I'm as excited as a kid in a candy store because today we're going to be telling you exactly why this vehicle behind me is one of the most ridiculous vehicles ever made. Now, before we get started, I do want to extend a huge thank you to Exclusive Cars here of South Salt Lake City, Utah, for giving me the opportunity to review this vehicle for you all today. If you guys are in the market for really any slightly used vehicle, make sure you check out their inventory. I'm going to put their information down in the description below. Okay, so about the H2 Hummer SUT. This is the truck version, as you can see back there, and we'll talk about that in just a second. This review is actually kind of coming out of a selfish spot because I have secretly always loved these vehicles. Kind of a funny story and background. When I was a kid, I tried to convince my parents to buy one of these vehicles. Actually, the SUV version is the one I preferred, but either way, it was the H2 Hummer because I loved it as a kid and even to this day. And it's funny because just to make me feel better and make me smile, they decided to go and test drive this vehicle. And I remember me and my family going into one of these vehicles and sitting in the back seats and just being so amazed and in love with this vehicle. Now, probably a good decision on their end. They did not buy one of these vehicles, but to this day, I still cannot forget this vehicle. And even though it is absolutely ridiculous, which we'll talk about today, I still think this has a special place in my heart. And I honestly think this has a special place in a lot of people's hearts because this thing, even to this day, is pretty expensive. It's actually held its value, probably one of the best out of any GM vehicle, aside from some of the classics. And the question is why? Why is this thing that everybody kind of despises maintain its value and is still so popular? And I think the reason is because the kid inside of us really sees this as like a Tonka truck or some sort of toy that, this cannot be a real vehicle. Just look at the proportions, the weird plastic parts, the weird chrome trim. I mean, everything about this vehicle looks like a toy. And so I think the kid inside of us really enjoys these vehicles, even though we shouldn't, even though we know they're pretty audacious and just a disaster. We love them. And I think that's why they sell so well. And if I could honestly pick one of these up for a good amount of money, I probably would, aside from the gas mileage issue that these vehicles have. Now, let's quickly talk about just kind of the high level stuff before I jump into the 5 reasons why this is the most ridiculous vehicle that's ever been made. First off, I want to talk about the chassis. So this does have a solid rear axle, but it does have independent front suspension. And one of the things that these vehicles are famed for is pretty good off-road dynamics and off-road capabilities. Now, it is a heavy vehicle, which we'll talk about in a second, but it is still pretty capable off-road, and you do have some skid plates out of the factory. But you do have an independent front suspension. It's actually a torsion bar suspension setup for the front. Now, let's talk about how this vehicle was built because its platform is actually an amalgamation of a few different vehicles. The first vehicle that they used as a platform for the H2 Hummer is the Chevrolet Tahoe from the mid-2000s. They melded that with their heavy-duty Silverado trucks and they came up with this thing. So the platform of this vehicle is built pretty solid. I mean, those are both pretty large SUVs. This is a body on-frame vehicle, and so that's why I think it's lasted pretty well, is because their chassis is pretty strong, considering this is partially a heavy-duty pickup truck. Now, for the first feature that makes this one of the most ridiculous vehicles, we actually have to get under the hood. And to do that, we're going to unstrap these little straps over here, which are really cool. Again, just like a toy would. And then the same on the driver's side, just like that. And then counter to what you may be thinking, there is a hood latch release, but it actually doesn't do anything. It's just here for appearance purposes because you don't need to pull on this latch to open up the hood. And then after you've released those little straps, you simply pull on these handles on the hood, and man, is this hood heavy. If this falls on you, it would probably kill you, but this is kind of a cool hood opening. So contrary to all other vehicles on the market, this is kind of like a Dodge Viper type opening, and it's cool because you can actually see the headlight housing and the 7-slot grille, and actually gives you really good access into the engine compartment. I like the way this thing opens. It is just very heavy. Okay, so the first thing that makes this pickup truck or SUV ridiculous is its engine. So they actually offer 2 different engine options, or I think 3 different engine options on the Hummer. But this one in particular is the 6-liter V8 engine that produces only 325 horsepower and 365 pound-feet of torque. Now that has made it to a 4-speed automatic transmission, and 0 to 60 on this thing is kind of ridiculous. We're talking about 10 to 10.5 seconds 0 to 60. Now, why this is ridiculous is the fact that this 6-liter engine produces the same amount of horsepower that a lot of new turbocharged 4 cylinders produce. And that's not really a knock at the 6-liter because that was kind of every car in the mid-2000s, but it is just a testament to how much technology has advanced in the last 15 years or so, where you can get a 4-cylinder that has this exact same amount of horsepower. I think if this vehicle was built today, not talking about the EV version, it would probably come with like a turbocharged V6 or something, or if it did have a 6.2-liter V8, it would have a much more higher output than this 325 horsepower. Now, in the later years of the Hummer, you could actually get about a 6.2-liter, which I think had about 390 or 395 horsepower, much more well-equipped for a vehicle with that much displacement. But nonetheless, you know, acceleration is just abysmal. There's poor aerodynamics, there's tons of weight on this. I mean, it was just a ridiculous size engine, but you needed it to be able to get this much power off the ground. Now, if you did get the 6.2-liter, you would actually get an upgraded 6-speed automatic transmission versus the 4-speed in this one. Now, the next reason these were so crazy is because of the MPG. And you probably all know about this, but you might want to take a seat because you get 10 MPG in the city and up to 16 on the highway. Now, it averages out to about 12 to 13 miles per gallon is what most owners got. And then looking at the odometer on this particular one, it looks like it has averaged 12.1 MPG. So just be careful of that if you're really conscious on your wallet. Now, the second ridiculous thing about this vehicle is its gross vehicle weight. We're talking 6,400 pounds as the unloaded weight of the GMC Hummer. That is an immense amount of weight. Now, in today's world, the Hummer EV is like 9 or 10,000 pounds. So really, this thing is nothing compared to that one. This thing's like a Mini Cooper compared to it. But still, back in 2007, that was a heavy vehicle, considering this is not really like a full-size or a heavy-duty pickup truck. Now, when you load all 5 passengers and get to its maximum payload of about 1,800 pounds, you're looking at over an 8,000 pound vehicle. That's really insane. Another thing to mention is this vehicle is actually rolling on 35-inch tires. So these are Hankook Dynapro all-terrain tires, and they look really good on this vehicle, but I'm pretty sure you could probably fit 37s, especially given the fact that your front approach angle is incredible. I mean, there's not really any bumper over here in the way. You have this large cutout, so this may be one of the best approach angles in the industry. Now, the next ridiculous feature about the H2 Hummer, specifically the SUT or the Sport Utility Truck, is its truck bed. And it's obvious they just took the SUV Hummer and just separated the interior cabin and cut off the rest of the roof. I mean, there's no ingenuity really here. It's just like super American style. Let's take a Sawzall and cut off the roof. And you know, the ridiculous part is the fact that this really isn't much of a truck bed. I mean, if you actually look at the dimensions of this vehicle, we're talking less than 3 feet. It's about 34.7, 34.8 inches of truck bed space, which is smaller than like a Rivian R1T or a Ford Maverick nowadays. I mean, this isn't really a usable amount of truck bed space. You can't load any type of toy back here. It's really pointless because anything you're going to put back here is likely not waterproof, and so it's just kind of an open storage container for no reason. Plus, the height of putting stuff into this bed, I mean, my chin pretty much ends right where this opening starts. So you're not going to be able to really lift anything and load it in here because it's such a tall belt line. It's just really ridiculous. Now, there is a saving grace to that, and really kind of a genius invention from GMC. Now, let me show you how to open up this rear tailgate. So you got to push out this little pin over here and then lift up on this little handle or this little lever, and then the tire frame will come out. And I got to say, this is pretty sturdy. I mean, if this thing falls on you, another thing that will probably kill you, just like the hood. But you do have to open this thing up pretty wide to be able to actually open up the truck bed. So once that is fully open, then you can pull on this little lever and the bed falls down. It is very heavy as well. Everything on this vehicle is incredibly heavy. No wonder it is over 6,000 pounds. And then this is the truck bed area. Again, not very useful. You do have a little bit of space over here on the left-hand side, but not much space over here because I think you have some battery components or something located underneath this panel. But this is where it gets really ingenious. So you see this little panel over here. Well, let me show you what you can do with that. So first, you got to turn the ignition on, or at least in the accessory mode, and then push on this button over here. And what that does is it actually automatically rolls down that rear window. And that's pretty massive. I mean, that's something you see kind of on a Tundra, but not very many other vehicles. This is a very wide window and kind of gives you an open air feeling. But there's another benefit to this. Once you've rolled down that rear window, you get into the second row and you pull on this little tab to actually fold down the second row of seats. Once this is in its locked position, kind of all the way to the front, then you can actually fold down the second row seat and kind of gives you a flat surface. Now we're going to do the exact same thing on the passenger side. So as you can see here, we have the seats folded down, the window is open. Well, there are these two buttons over here, one on the driver, one on the passenger side. And if you push on this button, it electronically releases a lock, allowing you to fold down this entire compartment. And then you can fold this flap over, and it gives you a pretty massive amount of trunk space. So if you happen to have a large piece of lumber or plywood or sheetrock, you could easily fold down that compartment on the inside and put in some extra feet of space. Now, I want to say that probably doubles the foot length of the interior bed. So you're probably looking at just around a 6-foot bed, or maybe just shy of 6 feet, which is, you know, pretty normal for a mid-size or even a large-size pickup truck with a shorter bed. That's not too bad. I got to say, that is pretty impressive and a cool feature that they added on the H2 Hummer to make it actually a pickup truck and not just a weird SUV with a cutout rear compartment. Now, the only downside to that is you can't really use this tailgate as an additional couple feet of space because you have to shut this giant tire, and you can't do that without lifting this up. But nonetheless, even with this thing closed, it's still a decent amount of space for a vehicle that's technically an SUV. Now, for the fourth thing that makes this vehicle ridiculous is actually kind of ingenious, and this is a feature that you're starting to see in modern pickup trucks, and kind of crazy to think about having this back in 2007 when this vehicle came out. So if you open up this little panel in the back of the truck bed, as you can see here, you actually have a power outlet. Now, this is just a cigarette style outlet, but still, back in 2007, you wouldn't really find any truck with any type of power supply in the back. And then up here, as you can see, there's actually a button with like a little tire inflator for like a bicycle. Well, if you have the ignition on, you can activate this air compressor and hook it up to this nozzle over here and actually inflate anything you want that obviously this air compressor can inflate. So if you have like a toy, like a maybe ATV or maybe a bicycle, you can use the air compressor in your vehicle to actually inflate the tires. That is really cool for back in 2007, and even F-150s nowadays are barely starting to get that type of feature. With that air compressor is another really ingenious and interesting feature that this vehicle came with back in 2007, and that is a rear airbag suspension. And what that airbag suspension did is, by pushing a button inside of the cabin, located right here near the gear selector, as you can see, there's a button that looks like, well, your rear tires are lifting up and down. Well, by pushing this button, you will actually activate the rear air suspension or airbags to lift this vehicle up to give it about an extra 2 inches of clearance on the rear end. Now that's meant for really off-roading or kind of, you know, extreme cases where you need the rear end to lift up a little bit more. Maybe you have some cargo in the back, but that is a really cool and ingenious idea for a vehicle that you would think is all kind of just reused parts or cheapness. That is something that really takes this vehicle to the next level, and I think that's also why people think this is a very capable off-roader, is because you do have an airbag suspension in the rear end. Now, for the last ridiculous feature, we're actually going to jump into the second row first. And that has to do with the sizing of this vehicle. And no, I'm not talking about how massive it is. I'm talking about how small it is on the inside. And this is something I noticed when I was a kid and my parents test drove one. The interior of this vehicle is kind of cramped. As I'm sure you can tell, I'm only 5'9", and I'm almost touching the roof of this vehicle. I've probably got like maybe 1.5 inches, 2 inches of space. Talking about legroom, let me show you what that looks like, because it's really not that great either. This is about where I would sit, maybe a couple or maybe 1 inch closer. And you know, I do have legroom, but it's not as much as you would expect for a vehicle this massive on the outside. Now, in terms of width, that's really the only place where you don't feel claustrophobic, because this is a very wide vehicle. I mean, as you can see, this rear window, you know, most cars probably end to this point, and then you have a couple, maybe 6 more inches of space on this vehicle as compared to anything else. But other than that, the interior is kind of cramped on the inside. I mean, you could probably fit 6 people just because of the width, but you're not going to feel super comfortable. Also, take a look at where the headrest is compared to where I'm seated. The seat pretty much ends at my shoulder, and so does the headrest. There's not really much, you know, headroom protection. So if you do get into an accident, I don't know exactly how the rear passengers are going to deal with that, because your head may be going through this glass. Now, before we jump up front, I do want to talk about another pretty ingenious feature on the H2 Hummer. First of all, you do have rear heated seats here, which is almost uncommon to find in modern vehicles, and this vehicle had it back in 2007. And there's 2 different settings for that too. So both the driver and passenger side have rear heated heated seats, but that's not what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to mention this rear infotainment system, because this vehicle actually has a radio in the back seats, and you have auxiliary jacks for both the passenger and driver side to plug in, and your volume controls. And this has, you know, FM, AM radio, and your Sirius XM. And by pushing this button over here, you can turn it on. And then as you can see, there's Ozzy's Boneyard. So this is Sirius XM. And then you can go through your source and go through your FM, AM radio, and then cycle through the different tracks. That is pretty unique. Now, I think both the passenger and driver side will listen to the same exact station, but nonetheless, to have rear seat infotainment back before they had iPads or iPhones, that's pretty ingenious and really cool. I kind of wish modern cars had that, and some of them do, but not all of them have like a rear radio system like you find in the H2 Hummer. Okay, now jumping into the front seats, you know, you can even smell that 2000s GM plastic and leather. It smells amazing. I love it. Starting off with the door panel, you know, I'm actually pretty impressed to the fact that they have this soft touch. I think this is like a vinyl, but it is still a somewhat soft touch material. You do have hard touch plastics all over, you know, this vehicle, but the fact that this section is soft touch, you know, that's actually pretty impressive. You know, I'm kind of a snob for that. This is a leather grip handle, and then just look at this door handle. This is how it opens. It kind of has like an angular look to it, so it doesn't open straight out this way. It actually angles up like a, you know, like a scissor door or something. It's pretty interesting there. This is, of course, slightly soft touch where you're going to rest your elbow, but you know, you can hear all the GM plastic and all the, you know, the shaking, typical GM quality back in the 2000s. You do have some storage compartments here. You also do have a 6-speaker Bose audio system, which is, you know, actually pretty good sounding. I turned the radio on earlier, and this thing bumps pretty well. I'm not gonna lie. For 6 speakers, I am impressed with it. Now, some pretty cool features here on the inside. So you've got your window switches, you know, your lock, unlock, your mirror controls. What I want to talk about are these features over here. So you do have heated front seats for driver and passenger. So you have 4-seat heated seats in this vehicle, and you can even control whether you're just getting heated seats in the back or the back and the seat cushion. And then you do have a button that will control your automatic up and down of all 4 windows. So by pushing this auto down button, it will actually roll down all 4 windows of this vehicle. That's really cool, because rather than having to push all the buttons at once, you can just push this button, then push this button again. It will roll them all back up. So try saying that 5 times fast. And then this is kind of a cool feature that I've been told was in a lot of GM vehicles of this day. If you have your seat position in like maybe super close to the steering wheel, or you know, you're just kind of in a tight spot on the interior, but you're trying to get out of the vehicle, well, if you push this button, it will actually move the seat all the way back and allow you for easier entry and exit. That's pretty cool, because sometimes you do drive in a totally different position than you're getting in and out of the vehicle. So it's nice to have the seat all the way back as you're exiting the vehicle as well. Now, jumping inside, these are the ebony all leather seats of the Hummer, and they're actually really soft and cushy. And considering this vehicle has 140,000 miles, I'll say they actually lasted pretty well. You do have a center armrest here as well for both the driver and passenger side, which is nice. And then jumping inside, this thing feels pretty solid, but you can hear, you know, a lot of plastics. Now, again, this vehicle has 140,000 miles. That's kind of to be expected. But you know, this thing, a lot of squeaks, a lot of GM plastic. Again, that GM smell that I absolutely love and hate. Opening this compartment up, it's, again, in terms of sizing, it's not as massive as you would think. I mean, this thing shares components with a heavy-duty pickup truck, and yet heavy-duty pickup trucks, even half-ton pickup trucks, have more rear legroom and more storage space in the center arm compartment. Considering this vehicle is so wide, you would think this thing would be a lot deeper and a lot wider. This is the steering wheel over here. Nothing too fancy to talk about. I mean, it is leather wrapped. You do have your you know, audio controls over here on the left-hand side with your voice activation, and then your volume and more seat controls over here on the right-hand side. And then coming down here, these are kind of your trip odometer information. So by pushing these buttons, it will show you info on that center display. And then same with this left-hand side, you push these buttons, it'll show you kind of your trip information. So this is kind of your instrument gauge cluster display right here, is this little screen here at the bottom. But that's to be expected for a vehicle this day and age. You do have your speedometer that goes up to 120 miles per hour. I don't think you'll ever reach that. And then, you know, your typical tachometer and your engine oil and gauge temperature information that you find elsewhere. Coming over here on the left-hand side is your light controls. I showed you this button to open up your rear window. Now, these vents are kind of cool. So they're, you know, circular, pretty cool. But then when you rotate them to the left or to the right, they will actually open and close the vents. So let me see if I can get you a better angle. As you can see, it actually like opens from the middle and kind of expands almost like a flower. And that's how they close off the vent system. So pretty cool, unique look to it. you know, nothing too crazy here. All of this is obviously hard touch plastic, as you would expect. This is a leather grip handle, which is nice for off-roading. And then this is your infotainment screen, right? You've got your radio controls here, nothing too crazy. These are your 4 high, 4 low. I think this has a continuously all-wheel drive system, so you don't have to put it in too high or anything like that. And then you do have a locker for the rear wheels as well, which is nice to have for off-roading. Coming down here, you do have dual zone climate control, which is really nice. Again, this isn't really a luxury vehicle, although it was priced as a luxury vehicle when it came out. And then, you know, you can control the passenger and driver side, your fan speeds. You know, this is how you turn the climate control system off and on. And then this little snowflake, from what I've been told, this is the AC button, but I've also been told if you push this button, then the AC won't work. So I'm not quite sure. You might have to be an owner to figure that out, but this is how you turn on or off your AC system. Over here on the left-hand side, this is kind of some of the cool stuff that I was talking about earlier. So starting at the bottom, that's how you axle lift your rear end. This is for when you're trailering something, kind of useful to have to turn on your trailer modes. And then this over here is your traction control system to limit wheel spin, especially if you're off-roading. You've got your OnStar and your phone stuff over here at the bottom. You have 2 cup holders over here. And this is your kind of cool looking fighter pilot type of gear selector. Again, something that's just really cool about this vehicle. It just, you know, you feel like you're flying an F-16 or something like that. Passenger side, not much more else to report. And then kind of a small-ish compartment. Again, everything on this vehicle and kind of the reason it's ridiculous is it's large, but it's also pretty small. I mean, it's very wide, but you don't get some of the advantages of it being very wide, like a larger center arm console or just tons of headroom or legroom. I mean, it's really not that massive on the inside, even though it is on the outside. And then you do have a sunroof up here, which is nice to have. It is pretty massive as well. I mean, you can tell the width of this vehicle because you can barely tell what's going on in that front end, but it's just not a very good use of space overall. Okay, well, there you have it, folks. Those were 5 reasons why this was one of the most ridiculous vehicles ever made on the planet, and exactly why I still want one. If I could pick one of these up for probably less than 10K, and if gas prices were cheaper, I'd be rolling around on one of these and you'd be seeing it on the channel. There's just something fun about it, something cool, because it is like a toy. If you guys did enjoy today's video, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for all of the weekly car videos, sometimes as ridiculous as cars like this, and sometimes a little bit more tame. Also, check me out on all the social media down in the description below, and if you guys are interested in this particular vehicle, if it's still for sale, I'm going to put its link down in the description below. And again, big thank you to Exclusive Cars for giving me the opportunity to review this vehicle for you all today. Well, as always, everybody, I hope you stay SchwayZ, stay healthy, have a wonderful day.